You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
In the spirit of Valentine's Day, let's take a closer look at who the Chicago Bears should have their hearts set on in the upcoming free agent class. This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lorin Cox. I'm an analyst for Pro Football Focus, and I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1. You can follow the podcast on Twitter at Locked On Bears. You can like Locked On Bears on Facebook. Join the Locked On Bears Facebook group for even more Bears talk. And make sure you hit that subscribe button on the Locked On Bears YouTube channel to keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today and every day. On the show today, we're going through who the Bears may have a crush on in free agency, who they should have their heart set on, and who may end up breaking their heart if they re-sign with their current team or end up ultimately signing somewhere else. We'll start with some wide receivers, some bigger names to try and pair with Darnell Mooney to build out a more robust receiving core group of weapons for Justin Fields moving forward. Then we'll move to the big guys. They deserve some love too, the big uglies up front. Definitely going to need some love for this Bears offensive line. Some really guys at all three of the offensive line positions kind of across the board. Some names the Bears could look at to bolster that group up front, again, with the goal of making Justin Fields' job that much easier. Then we'll wrap up with the other big weakness I think circled on this roster right now, the secondary, particularly at cornerback, but we'll throw some safeties in there as well, looking for either a pair for Jalen Johnson, to make, if we're doing matchmaking on Valentine's Day, that pair for Jalen Johnson, or maybe a new pair for Eddie Jackson to try and get that dynamic duo rekindled there on the back end of the Bears secondary. Promise I'll limit the Valentine's Day puns as much as I can there, but I'll sneak them in only when they come fresh to mind. I didn't have any of those scripted out in there. They've just been sort of top of mind as we, as we celebrate this day with the people close to us in our lives. Of course, it's not exactly a one-to-one translation there to football, but hopefully you'll bear with me and we will promise we're not going to make this weird. But let's start with wide receiver targets, right? It's obviously a number one wide receiver is a quarterback's best friend, much more platonic, I think, than Valentine's Day. But the big one, right? The big crush, the big number one free agent wide receiver that every Bears fan is at least looking out for. We don't know if he's going to be available. We don't think it's probably realistic for him to come to Chicago, but his quarterback coach is now the Bears offensive coordinator, of course, Davante Adams from the Green Bay Packers. Everyone wondering whether the breakup is going to come with Aaron Rodgers and the Packers, or whether Davante Adams can fit in there, whether they can afford to bring Adams back, or how else they want to handle that team, or if they end up trading Rodgers, or what they're going to do with Jordan Love, another Valentine's Day name there. I mean, a lot of questions still lingering in Green Bay before whether Davante Adams even becomes available. And then you throw on top of that the Bears' ability to potentially sign Davante Adams, because with each of these guys, we're not going to necessarily wring our hands over the salary cap implications, but just know that you can't afford all of them. And if you sign a big name wide receiver, free agent, or even defensive back, you might not be able to afford as much at other positions. But I don't think we need to break down Davante Adams, right? I mean, we know perhaps the best wide receiver in the NFL, if not number one, top three, at worst top five. I mean, he would just be a bona fide stud, elite route runner, size, speed, does everything, wins really well. And we know pretty thoroughly that it's not just Aaron Rodgers that it's made Davante Adams, but Davante Adams makes ridiculous catches, gets open, and regardless of when he's double covered or how teams try and stop him, he always produces for the Packers. And it's not just purely Aaron Rodgers. Other names, though, that don't quite take the top of the cake like Adams, but say Adams comes off the board or whatever and stays in Green Bay, but Bears still want to go out there and upgrade wide receiver. Right now, it's just Darnell Mooney and Daz Newsome under contract. We talked on yesterday's podcast about the lessons the Bears can learn from the Rams and the Bengals about, hey, you need multiple dynamic weapons at receiver positions, and the Bears can't just go in with Darnell Mooney and scrubs this next season. So how about the other franchise tagged receiver, Chris Godwin from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers? Obviously, some challenges with him, this season, and of course, not being able to give the full season's worth of production, but still, I mean, 1,100 catches and what was it, 1,100 yards, 98 catches, and just a heck of a production from him this season. He's been such a go-to weapon for Tom Brady. I think we got 5 touchdowns in there as well, and really a big part of how that Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense has been able to be so, and to be able to pair him up with Darnell Mooney would be a real challenge there. Or how about Mike Williams from the Chargers, right? Not as sexy maybe as the Davante Adams name or the Chris Godwin names, but like he and Justin Herbert had that real deep downfield connection, right? Williams is not the like well-rounded, all over the field type receiver the way, say, Davante Adams is, or even Chris Godwin to a lesser extent there. Right? They can do quite a bit of everything for your offense. Not that Williams can't do more than just the deep balls, but that's really where he thrived. And he thrived to the tune of, 76 catches, 1,100 yards, and 9 touchdowns, right? But like when you think about Justin Fields being that downfield passer where he thrives, you could see someone like Mike Williams and then pairing him with Darnell Mooney giving you 2 really great downfield options to open so many things then underneath for the likes of, Cole Kmet at tight end or David Montgomery or maybe Tariq Cohen at running back if Cohen's ever going to return from his ACL injury, right? Talk about being able to fly high with an offense and push the ball vertically. Mike Williams would be a fun addition there. Or how about Michael Gallup from the Dallas Cowboys? The Cowboys are in kind of a tough situation at wide receiver because there's some thoughts that maybe they could even trade Amari Cooper. I mean, that all of a sudden becomes a potential option for the Bears to maybe, undo or redo the 2015 draft with Kevin White. I mean, of course, Amari Cooper was taken first, so the Bears didn't have a chance to draft Cooper, but I wanted Cooper in that draft. A lot of draft analysts for the Bears wanted Amari Cooper in that draft, and we kind of had to settle for Kevin White. A Cooper trade, I don't know what the compensation would be at this point, but talk about a route runner, an all-around receiver, right? Not the fastest, most dynamic athlete on the field every time, but like gets open and catches the ball when you throw it to him. And that's all you can ask for in a reliable target for your quarterback. And since we're throwing trades in here as like, Valentines type, have your heart set on Calvin Ridley, of course, from the Atlanta Falcons. Again, another one of these like top flight, dynamic playmaking wide receivers. It's kind of had to be second fiddle for a little while there to Julio Jones. Now Julio Jones is gone and Ridley's reportedly not all that happy still in Atlanta. I mean, we know that Ryan Poles and Matt Ryan go way back. The Atlanta connection there runs pretty deep for this Bears team. Of course, Bears had Calvin Ridley's brother, and things didn't really go well with Riley Ridley. So I don't know if there's going to be enough family animosity there to certainly ruin the Bears' chances there. But, you just wonder, how that bridge might be crossed, and then trade compensation would be a fairly significant factor in both him and the Amari Cooper conversation. But like clearly a handful of like exciting, I think we went through 6 of them there, exciting wide receivers that would be really fun to add to this Bears offense that could do wonders for the development of Justin Fields. But just as important, if not almost more important, going to be building up that offensive line a little bit more. And we'll go through some of the top free agent targets the Bears should be interested in. Whether or not they become available is another question next on Locked On Bears. Football might be over for this season, but hey, the fun with sports betting doesn't have to end at BetOnline. Basketball, for example, is in full steam for both pro and college hoops. Maybe we'll get a baseball season if they can get their stuff together in collective bargaining, plus NHL season's underway and so much more. So with all the latest odds, totals, player performance props, and where the next fired coach is going to land, our friends at betonline.net are the number one spot for all of your sports betting needs. BetOnline remains the best spot for all the sports scores, podcasts, and news throughout any of the sports seasons. And it's not just football, it's not just basketball. BetOnline.net is your source for hockey, boxing, soccer, tennis, UFC odds, right up to the Olympic coverage and so much more. Head over to BetOnline today or use your mobile device to learn more all about the trends and actions you need to know and get in on some of the winning. Head on over to BetOnline because BetOnline is where the game starts. I think a lot of this offseason plan for the Bears needs to start with the offensive line, making sure that whatever combination of 5 guys you're going to go to is the best group to protect Justin Fields. Again, we talked yesterday, we saw it in the Super Bowl, how important offensive line was for Joe Burrow compared to the offensive line for Matthew Stafford, and how pass protection and run blocking, really for both of them, played a big role in this game. And so, of course, it's a little bit trickier with the offensive line in Chicago because, at wide receiver, we know it's Darnell Mooney and a bunch of space, right? They have to sign wide receivers. They're going to be forced to sign at least 2 plus draft at least one, along the way. There's a full on between Allen Robinson being a free agent, Bird and Marquise Goodwin, right? There's just going to be turnover at that position. But the offensive line is one where, as of right now, there doesn't quote unquote have to be a lot of turnover. The idea is just more so really trying to upgrade that spot and just get the best players in there, regardless of whether you drafted them or what sort of connection you might have already had. It's about getting the best players in there. So I think the Bears should at least consider the possibility of, signing a top flight offensive tackle like Teron Armstead from the New Orleans Saints. I mean, he's just been one of the best left tackles in the NFL. And you can say, well, yes, but the Bears have Tevin Jenkins and Larry Borom. They don't have to go sign a top flight offensive tackle. No, they don't have to, but I do want the best possible offensive line for Justin Fields. And, Tevin Jenkins had a partial rookie season. Larry Borom looked pretty good for a 5th-round pick during his, I guess, also sort of partial rookie season. But neither one of them is stopping me from signing at least one offensive tackle. I think for me, the strategy would be sign a veteran and then let all three of them compete and say our two best tackles, whoever out of the combination of the free agent, Tevin Jenkins and Larry Borom, our two best tackles are going to start, and we're going to leave them at those spots. And whoever loses out of the three, he's going to be our swing tackle, because we've seen Tevin Jenkins play left tackle and, of course, played right tackle in college. We've seen the Bears try Larry Borom at both tackle spots, and he's at least shown some ability to play left tackle in addition to playing pretty well at right tackle. So, worst case scenario there, you have a really good swing tackle as an option. And then, or maybe you can then consider, if Borom loses, for example, you could consider moving him into guard in the future. You find a way to get your best offensive lineman on the field. But I'm not going to say, well, just because I have these two rookies from the previous regime, I should add, that I'm not going to consider signing an offensive tackle. Certainly, the priority first does need to be the interior, because James Daniels is a free agent and Sam Mustipher a good enough starting right now. That doesn't mean I'm going to cut Sam Mustipher and give up on him as someone who can still develop, but I'm going to sign a player who should be the starter, or at least make it a competition. Give me another player who is starting caliber at center. And I think the big name on the market right now that's got to be, in the top of the wish list on Valentine's Day for the Bears is Tampa Bay Buccaneers center Ryan Jensen. Just a really solid veteran and a great duo for Tom Brady too in Tampa, where you just have two savvy veterans. I mean, of course, Tom's kind of in a league of his own, but they get the protection calls right between the two of them, right? You don't get those types of mistakes from the Tampa Bay offensive line. And I think someone like Ryan Jensen to help Justin Fields a little bit more in that regard, right? It's sort of a shared responsibility to get to see things on the field and pick them up and get them properly called. I mean, not that Jensen's old, but he's 30, right? He's been in the NFL a little bit now. He's under his belt, as opposed to Mustipher and Fields having to try and see things and figure some things out together, especially now when you don't know exactly what's going to happen with James Daniels, whether he should even be brought back or what his price tag is going to be, right? Getting someone really solid in there at center, or maybe they move Cody Whitehair to center, and then you have a vacancy at left guard and maybe a vacancy at right guard. Unfortunately, there's some pretty good guard options on the market, or at least set to become free agents. We've got, of course, I think the big one is going to be Brandon Scherff of the Washington Commanders, really now into his third contract. We knew when he was coming out of college, he was the top guard in that draft, and we were wondering whether or not he would be there for the Bears or in that consideration. And there was a really big debate, should you draft a guard in the top 10 of the draft? And Scherff has played like a top 10 NFL guard. There's no question that he would be just an absolute stud and is going to really, I think, set the market for guards on the free agent deals this season. But if he stays with the Commanders, which is still getting used to it, but I prefer football team to Commanders, honestly. But if he stays in Washington, some other, we call them second tier options. Laken Tomlinson from the San Francisco 49ers, another one of these, when you're talking about this Bears offense trying to build this, Kyle Shanahan style zone rushing offense, why not take Kyle Shanahan's guard? I mean, I know Laken Tomlinson started his career with the Lions, and I think he was traded to the 49ers a number of years ago. I don't remember exactly how he moved around, but he's been such a really just solid, steady contributor for them, right? He's not like a perennial Pro Bowl type free agent, and that will help him not necessarily completely break the bank the way Brandon Scherff is likely to going to command some pretty top dollar there. But I think he'd be a really good scheme fit. I also think Connor Williams from the Dallas Cowboys could also be a pretty good scheme fit, a guy who has had some struggles in his career. And I think, really sort of bounced back a little bit this year and solidified things. Offer a potentially I don't know if he's going to be that much cheaper, but given some of the ups and downs and some of the injuries he had, it could keep the price tag down. And more importantly, he's still 24, right? This is his second contract. He's more of a lineman you would invest in, and you get potentially a longer term type of building block. I mean, not that the 30-year-olds are old, but right, you could sort of have Connor Williams grow a bit more with you and some of the other younger offensive linemen up front. Honestly, I'd like to see the Chicago Bears go out and maybe get, two of those guys. Maybe they can't afford, Brandon Scherff and Connor Williams or whatever, but go out and if I'm the Bears, I'm signing a tackle and a center and maybe a guard too. I mean, you know what I mean? If you can swing all three, absolutely. I think the priority, first of all, is going to be guard, because you have to either re-sign James Daniels or replace him. Then next priority, very close to that, is going to be center. You need to upgrade the center. So whether it's moving Cody Whitehair inside or signing a new center, very, very high for me. And if you move Cody Whitehair, it increases the priority of guard. But again, you could sign a tackle and put Larry Borum in at guard. You could try putting Larry Borum in a guard. They're going to need to do some work on that offensive line, but we've seen Ryan Poles, the new Bears general manager in particular, do that successfully with the Kansas City Chiefs. I have to imagine Matt Eberflus is going to want to retool the Bears defense a little bit, particularly the back end in that secondary was such a disaster this year for the Bears. We'll look at some free agent targets who should be on their Valentine's wish list, where their hearts may go out to that cornerback and safety position, next on Locked On Bears. A lot of different parts the Chicago Bears could look at in free agency. And if you're looking for a wide variety of parts to pick from, our friends at RockAuto.com are going to be the place to go, because they have the web's largest selection of auto parts online. I've not seen a catalog deeper than theirs. You really, if they don't have it on RockAuto, I don't know that it exists when it comes to car parts, because when you go to the whatever it's going to be, right? Either you talk to the person up there, you try and describe to them what parts you're looking for. They just end up looking in their computer, and they're going to start, they're going to ship it to you, and you're going to have to pay, they have to pay that person and pay all the sort of middleman pieces along that supply chain. But RockAuto.com cuts all that out and gives you the lowest prices. Don't spend up to twice as much somewhere else for the same parts. Check out RockAuto.com and see all the different parts available for your car or truck. They're an online family business that have been serving customers, do-it-yourselfers, mechanics, all of the above for over 20 years. When you check out, write the words "Locked On" in their "How did you hear about us" box, so they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. RockAuto.com. The Chicago Bears secondary will need a few different parts this offseason, as they likely will need to sign at least one or two starting cornerbacks to go with Jalen Johnson, a slot and an outside, plus, something at safety to match with Eddie Jackson. They've been essentially 1-year deals. Sean Gibson the last 2 years, and Clinton Dix before that. But, Gibson has been an average to slightly below average at times veteran, and ideally you would like to upgrade that spot. You can sort of fall back on Gibson, I guess, if you need to, but more pressing is cornerback. We just can't afford to go with, Artie Burns and Kindle Vildor again for a whole season. It's not a free agent class, loaded with household names, we'll say, because there is some real talent of guys whose contracts are expiring and are set to become free agents. Of course, still time for any and all of these players to be re-signed by their current teams. But I think the top name out there is going to be J.C. Jackson from the New England Patriots. Again, it's not like a super sexy type of, free, this is not the Darrelle Revis changing teams, Nnamdi Asomugha back in the day for a real throwback, but J.C. Jackson had 8 interceptions this season and 9 interceptions the year before. I mean, cornerbacks like him are not, I don't think he becomes that super household name. If you don't watch the Patriots, you might be surprised to know that, he led the NFL with 23 pass breakups. He had a 92-yard pick six this season, right? I mean, he had a really, really good year. It's just not, it's not sexy and flashy. He's going to get top cornerback money Absolutely. But for some reason, we still only hold on to the Jalen Ramseys of the world, right? It's J.C. Jackson, and maybe it's the Patriots thing. I don't know what it is, but he's sort of flown under the radar. I mean, even Stephon Gilmore is more of like a household name, even though Gilmore had a much, much worse season after having left the New England Patriots. But like back-to-back 8+ interception years from J.C. Jackson are going to earn him some very, very big money. I mean, he's a playmaker through and through at that cornerback spot. He's 6'1", big, long, but can also move really well, can play really well in man and zone. I mean, he's a do-it-all cornerback, and some team, maybe the Patriots, are going to pay him some pretty big bucks to lock down their secondary. But heck, the Bears could have him and Jalen Johnson. That would be just a dream type of scenario there for the Chicago Bears. Maybe a little bit unaffordable for the other needs that they have on the roster. But, how about somebody like Carlton Davis from Tampa Bay? Another one of these sort of like bigger, longer, but also still young cornerbacks that, J.C. Jackson's 20 up on the end of his rookie contract. Carlton Davis turned 25 on the end of his rookie contract. I believe he had some injuries or some COVID this year that might keep his price tag down, but he's still, again, a very versatile but big and long cornerback. I think coming out, we kind of thought of him as a man type guy, but he really settled into more of those sort of off zone coverages at times in Tampa Bay. And I think he could do a lot of the things Matt Eberflus and Alan Williams are going to be looking for Chicago cornerbacks to do this season. And of course, the Super Bowl ring is not a bad prize that he's able to bring with him here and have some of that deep play. I think he would be a fun young for Jalen Johnson to have the two of them bookending your secondary for the next 4 years or however long you're going to sign Carlton Davis to as a potential free agent. If you want to go more the veteran route for like a real sort of savvy zone cornerback that, again, like scheme fit here in what the Bears are looking to do, how about the former Green Bay Packer, former Los Angeles Charger, now former Las Vegas Ram, Casey Hayward? He's 32, so this is not the long-term answer at cornerback, but you'd sign Casey Hayward, you draft another corner, or you bring back Duke Shelley and Kendall Viller will be back. You can still sort of develop them behind Hayward, and we've seen him be defensive rookie of the year voting early on, and I think he's been a Pro Bowler a couple of times. He had a 7 interception season with the Chargers there his first year. There are some injuries mixed in here and there, but has been really solid and was solid for the Raiders this past season. A little bit more affordable, I think, than J.C. Jackson certainly, and probably Carlton Davis too. But he could be, I think, a nice scheme fit for more of those cover 2 underneath zones that Matt Eberflus may look to run, but he can also go deep in off coverage, in cover 4 and cover 3, depending on what type of mixture this Bears defense is ultimately going to take. Want to throw quickly some safeties in there too, which I wouldn't anticipate, given the price tag of Eddie Jackson currently, that they're going to want to go out and spend another top dollar contract on another safety. But you never know, especially if they feel like it's going to be important for more of those 2 deep coverages to have a better option there. Certainly Marcus Williams from New Orleans would be a great fit as another sort of 2 deep safety to pair with Eddie Jackson. He's going to be, I think, probably one of the more top targets on the market, but he's been another one of those names that, like, maybe it's because it's such a generic sounding creative player name that like falls under the radar, but has been a really just solid, consistent, steady safety for the Saints for all 5 years of his rookie contract. And now, is coming up as a free agent here. And so, he's never been a Pro Bowler, but he's been steady enough and now, consistently generates turnovers and pass breakups, and on the back end was so reliable for them that he's going to command some pretty good money. We'll see what the safety market looks like, because they don't typically, in recent years, they have not been paid the way we tend to think they might end up getting paid. So maybe that brings the whole market down. So then maybe, somebody like Jesse Bates from the Bengals becomes a little bit more affordable. Maybe you're able to sort of pair him. He's been, again, a more of a rangy type of free safety, but we're going to see, again, a lot of these sort of 2 deep coverages still. It's sort of this blend between what we saw from Fangio and more like the Lovie Smith Tampa 2, right? We're going to sort of see more safeties on the back end. And I think both Bates and Williams, along with Eddie Jackson, can do some of both. Can be deep safeties, can come up and play one-on-one underneath, or try and be a little bit physical in the box. Although a few more missed tackles, I think, from the likes of Jesse Bates, much like Eddie Jackson. But the free agent safety name that I think would be really, really fun and more exciting, more of like a household name that gets you excited, Tyrann Mathieu, the Honey. Imagine sort of pairing him, freelancing, playmaking underneath, with Eddie Jackson deeper on the back end, who could also do some freelancing and playmaking. I just think the type of energy and, maybe call it swagger, call it moxie, call it whatever you want, that the Honey Badger could bring on the back end. He's certainly not the Tyrann Mathieu he was in Arizona quite anymore. Right? I mean, he's still very, very good. Don't get me wrong. It's not like I'm not saying he's washed. I mean, he's made the Pro Bowl, 3 years in a row. But, I think as he approaches 30, is going to, I think he turns 30 this offseason, and eventually he's going to start to get there. There will be a drop off eventually, but still, safety at a very high level. 3 picks this last year, 6 the year before that, 4 before that. He's been really phenomenal in Kansas City, even as their other safety, Daniel Sorensen, has been just a mess. And so obviously Kansas City's probably going to want to bring him back, but boy, God, that would be fun to see Tyrann Mathieu roaming around underneath with Eddie Jackson as the deep safety, because Mathieu can still go deep too, and Eddie Jackson can still, come up and play physical underneath in one-on-one coverage. So that's sort of that would be such a fun, my heart set on Tyrann Mathieu in the secondary. If the money's there and the scheme fit is there, and, you can fill your other needs appropriately, it'd be maybe a little bit more of a luxury, but hey, that's what this sort of Valentine's Day dreaming is all about. Who do we want to see? Who would we love to see the Bears go out and pursue in free agency? Some real top wide receivers, some solid offensive linemen, and some playmaking defensive backs would be just what the heart needs in Chicago to help get this team back toward contending under Matt Eberflus and Ryan Poles. I'd be curious to hear who your Chicago Bears free agent targets, Valentine's pipe dreams, whatever you want to call them, who you'd like to see this team go after if they are available. Let us know on Twitter at Locked On Bears, in the comments on the Locked On Bears Facebook group, or of course on the YouTube video. If you're watching on the YouTube channel with these videos, let me know in the comments below while you're there. Make sure you like the video. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel so you're keeping up with all of our video podcasts, because the Locked On Bears podcast is here for you 5 days a week. I appreciate you making Locked On Bears your first listen today and every day. If you're looking for your second listen, now that we're winding down here, the Locked On Podcast Network has your team every day, including all of your other Chicago sports podcasts: Locked On Bulls, Locked On Cubs, Locked On White Sox, and Locked On Blackhawks, all here for all your Chicago sports needs. So appreciate you tuning in. We're gonna go a little bit more deep on the Bears' offensive, defensive coordinators, and special teams coach all throughout the rest of this week. So I hope to see you back here tomorrow. And most importantly, I hope the Locked On Bears podcast helps you bear down.